On May 29th, President-elect Bola Ahmed Tinubu will not only inherit the mantle of leadership from President Muhammadu Buhari, but also the demanding task of ending Nigeria's myriad of security challenges. In over 10 years, Nigeria's security landscape has been shaped by war against insurgents such as Boko Haram and later the Islamic State of the West African province, ISWAP, in the northeastern part of the country. However, according to the Vice President of Nigeria, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, policing Nigeria is difficult. Hence the decision by the country's leadership to reorganize the security architecture for effective results. As the new administration is sworn in on Monday, the 29th of May, Nigerians are eager to know how to go about the business of policing in the country. Arise News security and defense correspondent Ferdinand Duroha captures the security challenges before the new administration in this report.
Security of lives and property are the main function of government. No meaningful development or progress can be achieved in any society that's lacking peace and stability. This is the reason why government must place a premium and show total commitment to safeguarding lives and properties of its citizens. Nigeria has had its shares of conflicts, with the climax being the Civil War from 1967 to 1970. But 5 decades since the war ended, many will argue that the administration of President Muhammadu Buhari has experienced the most trying times. This point of view is anchored on the argument that the administration experienced the peak of the Boko Haram insurgents in the northeast, banditry in the northwest and north central, clashes between herders and farmers in north central, and the secessionist activities in the southeast. The consequences are the thousands of killings of innocent citizens and members of the armed forces, thousands of people kidnapped, abducted, and also displaced from ancestral homes, billions of funds in naira and hard currencies paid as ransoms, and not to forget the loss of livelihoods. Despite these challenges, the administration of President Buhari is counting its gains in the fight against insecurity. It scores itself high on delivering the promise to combat insecurity bedeviling the country. The Buhari team says since 2015, the narrative has changed positively as a result of the visionary leadership of the president, who is a former military general. According to them, since the inception of the administration, there have been steady progress in building the capacities and capabilities of the armed forces, with resultant impact on all the operations across the country. The administration says it has been able to end devastating attacks like the bombing of the UN building in August 2011, several streets and market bombings, and the kidnap of 276 Chibok girls in 2014. The 4 platforms on which the government bases its achievements are groundbreaking policies, unprecedented acquisition of platforms, recruitment and capacity development of personnel. In a scorecard of President Muhammadu Buhari presented by the Ministry of Defense in February 2023, it lists the following as its achievements: degradation of insurgency, improved internal security, projection of air power, reformation and restructuring of the armed forces, acquisition of more than 38 aircraft and reactivation of many others, increased recruitment into the armed forces, establishment of training institutions, acquisition of more than 2,000 units of various armed fighting vehicles and equipment, improving combat readiness of troops, recapturing lost territories and cities from insurgents, procurement of over 415 platforms of various types and mix for the Nigerian Navy, fleet recapitalization of the Navy, detection and arrest of illegal vessels, ending pirate attacks on Nigerian waters and the Gulf of Guinea, protection of offshore assets, and launching of Delsat-1. It also lists the following policies as initiated and implemented: revised Nigerian National Defense Policy 2017, reform of the Ministry of Defense, establishment of Military Industrial Complex in 2015, the establishment of the Defense Industry Association of Nigeria, National Maritime Strategy and Implementation Plan, establishment of the National Hydrographic Agency Act 2021, and Gender Policy for Armed Forces of Nigeria 2022. The administration also speaks highly of its interventions on the Nigeria Police Force. It says this was done by increasing the number of police personnel by over 20,000, procurement of operational vehicles, equipment and weapons and accoutrement for the police force, and instituting several police reform policies. Despite these successes, reforms and policies, Critics say much more could have been done and achieved within the administration's tenure and the funds expended for the purposes. They refer to the inability of the government to rescue more than 90 of the kidnapped Chibok schoolgirls and hundreds of others still in captivity. This was a criticism against the previous administration and a subject of campaign during the 2015 elections. Huge ransoms paid by federal, state governments and even private individuals to rescue kidnapped victims. Several attacks on correctional facilities with hundreds of inmates still on the loose. Increasing accounts of killings in the southeast. Frequent attacks in the north central and northwest linked to farmer-herder clashes. It is for this purpose that critics are calling on the incoming administration of Asiwaju Bola Tinubu to do better. They say the incoming APC administration must carry the burden of strengthening whatever gains made by the previous government and accept the failures with a bid to quickly end all forms of insecurity so as to give way for economic development. This is also in tandem with the promises of President-elect Bola Ahmed Tinubu. In an 80-page document containing multi-sectoral policy options tagged Renewed Hope 2023 and unveiled as part of its manifesto, the former Lagos State Governor says he will prioritize national security. He affirms that security is the bedrock of a prosperous and democratic society, while promising to make it a fundamental responsibility to protect the lives and property of its citizens. He says this will be achieved by mobilizing the country's national security, military and law enforcement assets to protect all Nigerians from danger and from the fear of danger. To achieve this, Tinubu promises in his action plan to further equip the armed forces with more modern hardware and needed technological support. He also says police will be reformed to fully take responsibility for internal security. The plan intends to free police personnel from extraneous duties, such as VIP security and guard duties. It also commits to transferring fully VIP security and provision of security for government buildings, installations, and other critical assets to the Nigeria Security and Civil Defense Corps. This comes with a promise to evaluate the NSCDC and reform it to be better integrated with other internal security apparatus. Other plans by the incoming administration are to bolster Nigeria's security forces by recruitment and training. While these promises are laudable, analysts say the devil is in the details and its implementation. Some of its criticisms are that there is a need for a new national security policy that will detail the new reforms and its modalities. They have also pointed to biased or loop-sided appointments of security chiefs who oversee the armed forces and security agencies. The argument is that more importance is attached to selecting people on quota system or individual bias and not competence. Many have also raised the question of will and motivations to make the right decisions. They argue that although President Muhammadu Buhari was a former general in the Nigerian military, he could not end the war against insurgency. In all, some of the nation's biggest challenges, including food security, increasing numbers of out-of-school children, gender-based violence, unemployment, and lack of purchasing power, can be solved by ending insecurity. The outgoing administration is also bowing out with members of the armed forces involved in theater operations across all geopolitical zones of the country, showing the widespread impact of insecurity in the country. It is therefore imperative that the new government hits the ground running immediately, builds on existing achievements, and wins the war against insecurity. Ferdinand Duroha, Arise News.
Joining us now on the show to review Tinubu's security plans for Nigeria, especially in the area of policing Nigeria's homeland, is Felix Ogbaudu, former Assistant Inspector General of the Nigeria Police Force, and Onyekachi Adekoya, a Security and Risk Management Services Consultant and Fellow of the Nigerian Institute of Industrial Security. Thank you very much for joining us. AIG Ogbaudu, retired, and Onyekachi Adekoya, who is with us here in the studio. Well, you listened to that brilliant report by Arise News defense correspondent Ferdinand Duroha, and he made the point that, look, if a former military leader became president of Nigeria, he's not been able to solve the problem of insecurity. Nigeria is number 8 on the Global Terrorism Index, number 10 on the Global Security Index. And according to the Nigerian, tracker, security tracker, we're told that in 8 years, about 62,000 people died as a result of all kinds of security challenges. And now a civilian is taking over. He has said, yes, he will prioritize security, recruit personnel, use technology, bolster the various agencies. Well, what should be his main priorities? Because insecurity is perhaps one of the biggest challenges Nigeria faces. Let's start with you, Onyekachi Adekoya, here in the studio, and then we'll go to Mr. Ogbaudu.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Abati. I think the report by the correspondent was well researched, paints the picture as is. Yes, the government has made a lot of investment in equipment, particularly for the Navy, and in terms of air assets acquisition. But you see, we always ask a question: what's the utility of force in Nigeria? What are the benefits you get from deploying force at every instance? Because it would seem as though in our security psyche that you always call the military first to every issue, whether it be internal security or normal issues that the police should handle. I also saw in that report some comments about NSCDC. And then the Dangote refinery comes to mind. If you remember the case of the Saudi Aramco that got hit by some drones. And I begin to ask myself, what's our air defense capability in Nigeria like? How's Dangote preparing? Because the NSCDC is tasked with protecting critical national assets. And if you look at the report itself and the general assessment of the country, the threat environment now has a it has an array of dispersed threat actors, and the incoming administration is coming perhaps at a very wrong time. And I do feel sorry for the incoming president, because he has a lot of issues on his plate. And to the point you made about a retired military general not being able to fix the problem, perhaps Nigeria is now right for the military who transmuted from the khaki to Agbada to exit the scene completely, because since 1999, one way, in one form or the other, the military has always been there. And the utility of force doctrine simply says that we have benefited not much, because to a carpenter, every problem looks like a nail and he has a hammer. So deployment of excessive force does not address the germane issues in society. At the heart of every insurgency are sincere, genuine problems that must be resolved. And you can't shoot everybody with a gun. You can't do like the OD massacre. You can't declare a state of emergency across the country and then shut down enterprise. So I think that the issues that we have had, the hydra-headed issues, which we consider as wicked problems, are far beyond the remit of what the curriculum of a regimented person can address. Because if you look at since 1999, since the advent of democracy, you now had a lot of pent-up frustrations coming to the fore, because now you have a democracy, people can vent. The issues that were created by colonial fiat, the colonial powers just merging Nigeria together with over 250 ethnic nationalities. When you talk about national security cannot mean the same thing to 250 nationalities. Because what is national security to the Yoruba man is not the same thing as that to the Igbo man. So if you sit down in Aso Rock and your regime is fully protected and secured in place in Abuja, and the person in the seat of power is completely isolated from the realities from the local communities, what we continue to have is a misappropriation of force. And so if you ask for my fair assessment of the Buhari administration in the past 8 years, I would say that he has tried, but he has failed. He has failed because, like you clearly read out, the over 60-something thousand people killed is an underreport. Nigerian Security Tracker does not have all the information out there. Far more people have died. I listened to Mr. Additional yesterday on a show say that before the Buhari administration came, over 17 local governments were in the arms of Boko Haram, and therefore give the government a pat on the back because they've dealt with the issue of Boko Haram. But excuse me, somebody signed up for a job to protect lives and property for which he is paid every month. And if you say yes, rightly so, the issue of insurgency has been dealt with in the Northeast. What about the issue of armed banditry? The claim that it is new is a lie. It's been there, and it comes back to the issue of the promises politicians make. And I get the sense that they don't understand the problems fully before they take office. And once they get into office, the reality hits them. Armed banditry has been in the Northwest since the 80s. We've even had the Satariru Mahadi's insurgency that even held territory as way back as the early 90s in the Northwest. So I would say that, yes, they've made progress in terms of investment of equipment, recruitment of personnel, training, even collaboration with the UN, the EU. But in terms of how widely dispersed the problems that we now face are, and the amount of wanton killings that happen every day in Nigeria, I think that you cannot give this government a pass mark. That would be my fair assessment.
Okay, AIG Ogbaudu. AIG Ogbaudu, thank you for staying with us. Well, your assessment of the outgoing administration and what you think about where the incoming administration should start from, beyond just saying security will be a top priority.
Okay, thank you very much for having me. I want to start by saying that governments have failed in their primary responsibility as provided for in Section 14, subsection 2B of the 1999 Constitution as amended, which says the security and welfare of the people is their primary responsibility. Well, some people might want to say that the outgoing regime government have probably done much, because we're in a country where we keep on defending the indefensible and justifying the unjustifiable for our personal reasons. Let me digress a little bit. Just this morning, as I was listening to newspaper review, Festus Keyamo, son, Minister of State in the Ministry of Labour, one of the papers reported that he lambasted Buhari. I have not gotten the details here, but I wasn't too shocked to hear that. But my surprise is that, well, I was not too surprised to either. Some people might be asking, why is he saying it so belatedly? If he had said it much earlier, they probably would have asked him to resign, and he didn't want to resign later. That is why he's saying it so belatedly. Now, to address the issue on ground, what are the factors or the challenges we have as a nation that have kept on fueling insecurity in our nation? That is the fundamental question we also need to address in every state and nationally. It is equally good to highlight the fact that we need to recruit more hands, because the strength of our security agencies, the numbers are grossly inadequate for our population. The population of Nigeria we are told, is close to 200 million for now. The population of Nigeria has exploded. Now there is so much frustration, anger, joblessness, homelessness, poverty, and all of that. Let us try and address these issues. Why did we have the Boko Haram coming on board in the Northeast, for instance? Why the insurgency? People are kidnapping to collect ransoms. And that's what they think is the only way to make money. Now, the security agencies need to brace up to their responsibilities. The security architecture of this country also needs to be reviewed, reformed, and all of that. We need to have many more hands, improve on the training and empowerment for them to make them professionally competent to cope with the challenges we are facing, and they must also be trained to be proactive. The fire brigade approach to combating crime and criminality nationwide is not helping matters. And my own observation is that, for instance, a community is attacked, people are killed, houses are burned, security agents are mobilized there. After about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 days or a week at most, they pull out and tell you that the situation is back to normal, blah, blah, and all of that. These criminals have their own security network, their own intelligence network. They are watching their security operatives. The moment to pull out, they go and reorganize themselves again and go and strike. So we need to have overwhelming security presence in this country. A lot of states so many of the states in this country, so many parts within those states, you don't find any security presence. In a nation where lawmaking, that's legislation, has become so lucrative and is more financed than law enforcement and providing security, is not the best for us. I've always said it times without number. In the absence of security, wherever, insecurity thrives. I've also said it takes so little to destroy, but so much to build. That is why we must make security priority in this country. We have a country where everybody keeps on wanting to go to the National Assembly, want to go into politics, and when they get in there, they get enmeshed in this sit-tight syndrome. You go in there, nobody wants to leave. I also read one of the papers, this morning. They said Mr. President wants to go back to his cattle rearing business. And what does that imply? Some people see it as laughable something. No. I think the sense there is that when your tenure expires or you've lost out in politics, maybe in the National Assembly, for instance, if you're a medical doctor, go back to your medical practice. If you're a lawyer like myself, go back to your legal practice. If you're an engineer, go and look for something in the engineering sector to sustain you. Any profession you belong to, if you're a teacher, you can still go to teach, or a lecturer, you can still go to lecture. But the situation whereby people stay there, they are fighting and all of that is not the best. We don't have the interests of this nation at heart. And it's very, very laughable. I recall one of my trips to Israel with a pilgrimage, and a young lady insulted one of my colleagues there, a friend I met there, when she was telling the Nigerian pilgrim that, look, you Nigerians, your nation Nigeria is overblessed with human and material resources. But because of corruption, you can't make any progress. If God had blessed Israel with what he blessed Nigeria with, Israel would have ruled the world. My friend felt very sad, and I asked him, I said, look, just take it easy, don't get angry. I want to ask a simple question and give me a yes or no answer. What she said, is it true or false? He took a deep breath, and said, sir, it's true, but I said, hold it, leave it at that. There's no but about this. And that, again, is part of the problems we have in this country. A lot of issues, challenges facing the average Nigerian, nobody looks at them. And you see people in politics, politicians, living very affluent lives and all of that. So much money, so much expensive cars, huge properties, houses and all of that.
All right, Ogbaudu, I'd like to come in here because you have highlighted some critical things in terms of the challenges that we face. But in a few days' time, in fact, in 4 days' time, we will have a new administration come into power. And they have set out a security agenda. In fact, the president-elect, Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu, has said that security would be priority in the next administration as it ought to be. One of the things he had said was to empower the police force to be able to take care of internal security. What we have seen in the past, or at least very recently, is that the military, the focus has been on the military in terms of even securing the internal borders of this nation. How do you think in practical terms? Because now we want to examine his plans. We want to hopefully set an agenda to see how this can actually work. What are some of the key things, immediate wins to strengthen, to empower the Nigerian police force to be restored to what it was initially, intended to do as an institution? And then for Mr. Adekoya, you spoke about soft power and not just military approach to tackling insurgency, banditry, particularly in the northeast, northwest. I would like you to delve into that a bit more. Analysts have talked about a community-based approach. We've looked at the, so involving community members. Analysts have talked about perhaps even corruption along the train, including amongst security agencies. How can the new administration begin to tackle that? But I'll come to AIG Ogbaudu first of all to respond to the first question.
Okay, thank you very much. I think I will suggest to the incoming administration to set up maybe a committee to address, a committee that will be made up of representatives from all the security agencies. Let them come together, address our security challenges, and try to see how we came about all of this. How do we get to where we are today? And what is the way forward? What have we been doing wrongly that we need to do right now? Then, secondly, I've identified some of the problems plaguing some of the security agencies, especially the police, who I served for 35 years. United Nations ratio is one police officer to 400 people. A population of almost 200 million like the size of Nigeria today. The strength of Nigeria police force as of today is a far cry from that population of this country. So we need to recruit more police officers, and we need to also emphasize competent hands that we're going to recruit and very sound training for them. Very sound trainings for them. It's a shame. If you go to most police training institutions, there's nothing to write home about them. We need to bring up the quality of training institutions in the police force. Good structures, infrastructure and all of that, equipment to train them, and let us have the very best so that we can churn out the very best police officers after their training and before they are deployed. Then thirdly, they cannot combat or confront these criminal activities with their bare hands. They need to be well equipped with not just firearms, technology-based crime fighting moves should be put in place. Because not just can't be firing guns here and there. Then of course they must be proactive. Let us look around. Enhance our intelligence gathering outfits so that before some of these things happen, you get to know them and we can nip them in the bud. But to allow them to happen only for us to start reacting later, like I said, that is fire brigade approach. It won't take us anywhere. Then, of course, the welfare of the security operatives needs to be prioritized too. Because a lot of them, maybe they are frustrated. One time I travel by road and I see some policemen on the highways, the way they conduct themselves, the way they are dressed, I mean, it's a shame. It's a shame. So we really need to restructure the security architecture of this country. Let us call a spade a spade. Let us invest more, allocate more funds to provision of security and less to lawmaking, legislation. There's a country within the West African sub-region. Legislation there, that is the National Assembly duties and all of that, it's a part-time job. But here, look at the population of the people who have the National Assembly, the Senate, the House of Reps and all of that. And the amount of funds that goes into that. When they lose elections, they are paid severance allowance. They are bought expensive jeeps anytime once they come in and all of that. So let us reduce all those expenditure in the government and focus on security.
All right.
I can assure you, if Nigeria is well secured, then we can also be, we are talking about attracting foreign investors. How will they come here when the place is not secured? Nobody does that. You can't invest your resources in a place that's not secured. So we must prioritize security. Train the police officers well, equip them well, motivate them well, take care of their welfare.
All right, thank you very much for summarizing your points there. We'll come back later on, we'll come back hopefully to even delve into, in terms of the welfare aspect. and what obtains now, and in practical terms, what ought to be. But let me come to you, Mr. Adekoya, and to go back in terms of the softer approach to dealing with insurgency, banditry. How can we begin to work with the community and also deal with issues around corruption in the system?
Yeah, thank you for the question. If we are reviewing the plans of the incoming administration, I think I did listen when the president-elect said they would employ more persons for the security forces. I don't think that that's what we need now, very sincerely. You can't keep throwing money and people are the problem. What we need, and what the three major candidates campaigned on, was state policing. And I do hope that they would walk the talk. Because when you talk about the previous approach to community-based security, when we rolled out the community policing initiative, what we simply did was to say that you have a member from the community who will not be paid. You see some of the flaws of the problem, the system they run. Who will not be paid, who will not be armed, who will work on a volunteer basis to work as a community liaison officer, to breach what? The trust deficit between the people and the police. And you know, when that policy was drafted, I said it will not work. We're amongst the few people that said it will not work, and it did not work. So what has to change? And I do hope, and I agree with the AIG, that the incoming administration must have a sit down. At the heart of the problem are the state governors. And that is the sincere truth. I listened to the chairman of the Constitutional Review Committee, particularly when they had to review the Police Act. And the report we got was that, I mean, for you to amend any section of the Constitution, you need at least 2/3 from the State House of Assemblies. On the issue of state police, the State House of Assembly themselves did not support that review. So those are some of the issues. The issues that we have are political in nature. If you look at our national counterterrorism and countering violent extremism policy, you will see the regimented imbalance we have in the discussions on insecurity. The first pillar upon which counterterrorism is supposed to thrive by our own policy is to forestall crime. It makes no sense. You then put to identify the risk and source of threat to the state as a fourth pillar. The first thing you do is to identify the risk, prioritize your assets, and then go to developing a national security program. The word security architecture has been overflowed. We don't have an architecture as is. All we have is a system of force that prioritizes regime protection. And kudos to some of the achievements that rolled out by the past administration. They tried to revise the national security strategy document, and they failed perhaps. So what the incoming administration should do is to have a sincere sit down with the state governors. There are sources of conflict, and these conflicts degrade quality of life and access to resources. The governors are stifling the local government. All the crimes happen at the local community. If you remove the local government from playing security, you have a problem. So I think that there are a number of issues that the politicians just gloss over. It's not more personnel. And I just round up with this point, and I say that a popular uprising has an inherent advantage over an occupying force. So that's why you see that in the Southeast, for example, the kinetic approach is failing, will continue to fail, because the agitations, they are germane. As you have agitations in the North Central, Northwest, and Northeast. So just to pepper over these things and say you need more, no, we need to look at the fabric of society and address germane issues of threat to life and access to resources.
So 2 questions I'll ask both of you.
Yeah.
I want you to talk to me about border security, 1. 2, tribal conflicts, which is one of the biggest bulk of insecurity in most parts of the country today.
Now, for border security, that would now delve into the domain of international diplomacy and our good neighborliness, or what you then call our Africa-centric international policy approach. Because without good neighborliness, even though you have good security in your state, you can only do as much as your border allows you. So international policy and diplomacy, we have to play that very carefully. In terms of tribal approach, I talked about the degradation of quality of life and access to resources. These are key issues.
What about cases like land grabbing? That some tribes are trying to come grab land and encroach on the land and kill other people.
No, Rufai, that is secondary. You see, some of those things happen because the politicians benefit from the chaos. And that's why the president-elect, when he becomes president, as a leader of the country, must now have a sincere sit-down with the governors in their states. It's just a simple thing. If you say to each governor, I hold you responsible for insecurity in your state, let us drive a pilot state police scheme. Let's try that for the states that can and want to. Drive that scheme. Have that, because at the heart of everything we are not talking about is the politics that we play in Nigeria and the feeling of marginalization. And when people have a genuine complaint and we then, talk over their heads, and that would create conditions for crisis and conflict. Okay. So these conversations, we need a whole day for it.
Let me quickly go to you, sir. I want to talk about border security, tribal conflict and tribal strife, dominance of land, people taking land from other people because of tribal sentiments. What's your take on those issues, sir? Quickly, sir, as we start to wrap up. Yes, sir. Go ahead, sir. Can you hear me, sir? Can you hear me? Oh, I'm not sure.
Am I the one to speak?
Yes. Go ahead. It's you, sir. Go ahead, sir.
Okay. The issue of tribal conflicts is something that is very, very worrisome. And the two locations that have been known for this are Benue and maybe Taraba. The thieves and jukuns and all of that. And these are issues that can be addressed by the governors, like my colleague rightly said. Maybe the president can come in and find out what is the problem, what is the root cause of all of this. Then we can address them. Oftentimes it is dispute over land, somebody is encroaching on our land, somebody is killing our cows, somebody is doing that and all of that. It also goes to show the level of illiteracy, education, understanding of our people. Why we choose to be taking laws into their hands? Maybe because they think the state government, the federal governments have failed them. So I think we need to advocate negotiations. We need to negotiate, go to round table, and identify the root cause of all of these problems. That will take us a very long way. Secondly, the issue of border security. Our borders are very porous. And a lot of Nigerians exploit that state of the borders. Somebody told me some years back, a lot of cars are smuggled in from Republic of Benin into Nigeria, through Lagos there, through Lagos border there. If cars are imported to the Republic of Benin, they are told the duties paid there are a lot cheaper than what is chargeable in Lagos and all of that, and they are brought in there. Then, of course, you have insurgents who stray into our territories unchecked. So it's not just the roads, they identified the roads people can use to come into the country, to our nation. Other areas need to be policed. If not physically, there should be area surveillance that should be sustained to check the influx of criminals coming to the country. That will go a long way to help us. Then, having said that, let me address an issue my colleague raised. The issue of state police, I very much subscribe to it. But my biggest worry is that a lot of states in Nigeria cannot afford to finance or bankroll state police. We know that a number of states cannot even pay salaries of their civil servants. They are talking of taking over the responsibility of sponsoring a police, to have a state police. The advantage of state police is that the police officers are men recruited from within the state who understand the terrain, the culture, and all of that. So normally, they will provide better security. But regrettably, most of the states cannot afford to finance state police. Because one, the internally generated revenue is very low. We're in a state where everybody looks up to the center for allocation on a monthly or quarterly or annual basis. Once those ones are short of, some of the states will almost collapse. So state policing is a very good idea. I subscribe to it, but my fear, my worry is that a lot of states cannot finance it.
Well, thank you so much for your take on the conversation this morning. AIG Felix Ogbaudu retired, and Mr. Onyekachi Adekoya, a security expert, as we look at the national security plan of the incoming administration of Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu.